Hey guys, subscribe for daily content. And if you're shopping for gear, make sure you check out the description for the newest items at some of the very best online retailers. There's also links for some of the items that I personally recommend. Thanks! What's going on YouTube? Metal Complex here, and today I've got another interesting knife review / knife overview to share with you guys. This is the Kansept Arcus, which is, I don't know if you can actually see it, an O-stap hell design. This is a reasonably priced knife from Kansept. It is absolutely available and comes in a few different color setups or aesthetic setups, so you can check it out if you want to. I'll link this and the other variations right down in the description of this video. It does help my channel when you use those links, but that's entirely up to you. Thanks so much to Kansept for sending this knife in for review. Thanks to my patrons for supporting me, and please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. Let's go ahead and measure this knife. It is obviously a very thin profile, but it's not small. In fact, the overall length is 7.75 inches. Blade length is coming in at 3.5, and your cutting edge about 3.35. Stuff's falling off my shelves on the right there. So you actually get quite a bit of cutting edge. Let's go ahead and do some size comparisons up against let's start off with the Spyderco PM2 and Para 3. You can see here it's fairly long. It's just really slender. How about up against the Ontario Wrap Model 1 and the Ontario Wrap Model 2? I don't know why I switched it up today, but I did. There we go. How about up against the Demco AD 20.5? And last but not least, let's put it up against the Benchmade Griptilian, or in this case, the Ritter Hogue, and the Benchmade Bug Out. How is the action on this guy? Kansept knives are made in China. They do a really good job and use, sometimes they use premium materials and sometimes they use more budget-friendly materials. This is definitely a more premium knife. The action is good. As far as, thin knives go, the action is decent. It's not going to readily fall shut. You're going to have to give it a little bit of encouragement, right? The flipper tab is tuned nicely, and the fact that this is something that I always talk about when we're talking about thin profile knives, you're going to do a frame lock. You really have to have most of it tucked underneath an overlay, or an exposed frame lock on a really thin profile knife just doesn't work because you're putting unnecessary pressure on the lock bar while you're trying to flip it, resulting in usually your finger doing this, which really hurts, or just not being able to flip it at all. But, the way that it is good. It will flip reliably. The detent is tuned correctly right there. I actually did exactly what I was talking about. So it does have a heavier than you might expect detent, but you'll adapt to it. You can actually dig under here and reverse flick it. It takes a little bit of force to do that because the detent is heavier than you might expect, and now I'm not really able to do it. The lower you get, the easier it's going to be. Trying to do it up here doesn't really work, but if you can manage to get low enough, I'm not going to be able to demonstrate it properly, but if you can manage to get low enough and you work it out, you can do it. It's just not super duper organic. I'm not sure that they actually intended for that fuller there to be, the detent's really not that heavy. I think it's just the way everything is set up, like the weight and mass of the blade in relationship to the flipper tab. But I think that they really just intended this to be more of an aesthetic thing, which it's doing just fine, right? So the easiest way to deploy it is with the flipper tab. Access to the lock bar is good. They've carved it out here on this side, and they've also scalloped it on that side, so that's nice. You're not having to fight it. It is very close to double clutch, but not quite. The detent ball just barely makes it up onto the face of the blade. Actually, the detent ball is right here. Yeah, it does. It's just barely there. I just wasn't sure. So keep that in mind, but no double clutch. Let's go ahead and do carry profile. Thickness up against the Spyderco Para 3. It's actually a little bit, let's get it right. Just slightly thinner. Length and height up against the PM2 and Para 3. This guy is super duper thin, only just a hair longer than the Para 3 closed. Way shorter than PM2, nowhere near as tall because of that slender profile, so that's going to be nice and easy in the pocket, but not small enough that you're going to forget that it's there. Let's go ahead and do a hardware check. Actually, no, let's weigh it first. So for materials, we are looking at S35VN. This particular version has some toxic green G10 inlays, and then the frame is titanium. There are versions of this with carbon fiber, and honestly, maybe even a couple other things. Some versions have Damascus blades. You'll just have to look and see. Weight is coming in at 2.65 ounces. Very light considering you're getting 3.5 inches of blade and 3.35 inches of cutting edge. So that's really nice. Anybody looking to, maximize the amount of cutting edge and minimize the amount of weight, this one's definitely doing a good job. Let's go ahead and get out my tools and do a hardware check as per usual. My tools are very inexpensive and very recommendable. You can find them right down in the section of my description that talks about, the tools I use on this channel. They can be slightly difficult to hang on to sometimes. The pivot is a T8 and the body screws are a T6. There's just one though on each side and one holds in the pocket clip. So that's really nice. This is a really simple knife in terms of disassembly. T6 screws, I wish they were T8, but that's okay. As long as you have the proper tools and a place to put your hardware, you should be good to go. Let's go ahead and measure blade stock thickness here. I'm going to guess that's about 120 thousandths, maybe a little bit thinner, as it should be. No, it's even thinner, 115 thousandths. Alrighty, let's go ahead and move into the meat and potatoes here. This is a cool looking knife in the sense that it's super thin, right? A lot of times this is really hindering. There have been a lot of knives that look cool and then in practice they're just kind of awkward to use because they're so thin. Your fingers have to be placed on more narrow surfaces to get that sort of flipping and manipulation experience that you expect from any pocket knife. But this does an okay job of it. I'm not going to pretend that it isn't a little awkward, especially if you're transitioning from something like this to something like this. It is a little bit weird, but not something you won't be able to adapt to, right? Really, the big thing here is that most of the frame lock is underneath this G10 overlay, and that makes it really, really easy to manipulate. So, but I do like how it looks, and I really like the inlay work. I think that looks nice. That's it's always neat when we see something like this versus just like a plain titanium frame and there's just nothing going on there. I, for some reason, am attracted to the toxic green color. I just think it's neat. We don't see it a lot, and it's neat that Kansept is willing to use colors like these on their knives, because other companies are just like, no, we're going to do dark blue and we're going to do bronze and we're going to do flat plain tie and that's it, right? But I think it's cool that Kansept will use purple and pink and crazy, weird colors. And then they'll also make more basic versions of the knife, or with more subdued colors and more traditional, like tactical knife colors for people who don't want all the color on their knives. But I like it. I think it's neat. And their inlay work is very, very good. Everything looks great. I really don't have an issue with it. I'm also glad that they did the inlays on both sides. I think that looks nice. Ergonomically, it's about what you'd expect. It's like holding onto a thick pin that's kind of got some funny angles. It's okay. This isn't a hand melting perfection. It's about as good as I would expect for a knife that is really, really slender, right? Don't expect this thing to be an absolute, masterful comfort design or anything like that, but it's good enough. And there's plenty of real estate. There's plenty of room to get your hands in here and get like a 4-finger grip on it if you would really need to hold it like that. Most of the time, you're going to be holding it like this, or you're going to be holding it like this. So yeah, ergonomics are all right, about what I'd expect for a design like this. It's just not amazingly comfortable or anything. The blade is definitely cool. It's just like an elongated Warncliffe with a long fuller that runs out into a secondary swedge out here that follows down to the tip. There's a little bit of a swedge up here. It looks nice, right? It'll excel at your draw cuts. Probably not going to be super great at slicing, even though we're only looking at 115 thousandths on the spine. It doesn't really drop down to an amazingly thin cutting edge, but it's okay. I mean, it'll still slice if you guys want a demonstration of that. It obviously will become aggressively less slicey the more you use it, right? But you can slice. It's just, you can see it's kind of lifting the edges of the paper because we don't have an amazingly thin edge geometry, but that's okay. It'll cut, it'll poke, right? It'll do what you need it to do. Kansept does a great job with their tumbled finish. I like that high reflectivity. You can see here, it says Kansept. It's got some code on it. It says S35VN, and on the other side it says Ostap Held Design and Arcus. We don't need the name of the knife on the blade. The Ostap Held Design is fine. S35VN and the Kansept logo is fine. They have really made it tiny, and they've also gone out of their way to try and hide a lot of this stuff. But there's just still some unnecessary things on here. Not as crazy as some of their other designs, right? I'm not a huge fan of billboarding, and it's something that I notice. You might not notice it, in which case you might not really care. But it's something that I notice, and it kind of drives me nuts. The overall fit and finish of this knife is very, very good. Kansept has come a long ways since the very first model that I handled, right? And it's not that they were ever bad. It seemed like they needed to catch up a little bit, and I feel like they absolutely have. Every part of this knife is executed flawlessly. Overall fit and finish, the cutting bevels, right, the final apex of the blade is even on both sides. The inlay work is good. The seating of the hardware is good. The detent's good. Feeling of the action's good. Just feels like Kansept has really caught up. And it's nice because it allows them to do, less orthodox designs like this, and, without their customers having to be afraid that something's going to be wonky and really ruin the design. No, not at all. Fit and finish is very good. There is a little lanyard bar thing, which is kind of weird because it doesn't leave you a whole lot of room to stuff 550 in there, but if you really want to, you can. I like that there is a milled titanium clip. That's cool. No backspacer, but a nice milled titanium clip. Sorry, lefties. I don't think, I'm going to take it off there just to look. I don't think that that's sitting flat on top of the scales. I mean, if it is, then you might, but it's not a symmetrical clip. So no, it's not going to flip over to the other side either way. But you know what? I am curious to see if it's slightly nested. I mean, I feel like it should be because there's only one screw holding it in. So let's take a look here real quick, just for the sake of making sure that I know exactly what I'm talking about here. And it wants to pull the whole scale out. Can I get it to wiggle out of there? Can you come out there, guy? What's going on here? Are we, Oh, we've reached an interesting part of the review where my flow has been completely halted. What's holding the pocket clip in? Well, I can see here. No, it's moving. That is bizarre that it's not wanting to come out. What else is holding this in? Is there another screw? I think the threads of the screw are just holding it to the G10 scale. I mean, you can see what's happening here. But actually, this pocket clip appears to be sitting right on top of the G10. So it is, but they didn't do a straight clip. They did a clip that follows the lines of the body, which means that you cannot flip it over to the other side. If they were going to do it, number one, I don't think that this should be sitting right on top of the scales with one screw. You need two screws if it's going to sit right on top of the scales, or it needs to be nested into the G10. And also, if you're going to seat it right on top of the G10 scales, you probably could have done a symmetrical clip so that it could have been flipped over to the other side. Yeah, it won't follow the body lines, but then lefty people can enjoy it, right? I think they could have easily designed a pocket clip that, you could have just flipped over, right? But I don't really like that it's just one screw and it's sitting right on top of the scales. We need two to make sure that it doesn't wiggle and flop all over the place. But not really that big of a deal. It's snugged down and the thing doesn't seem to want to move, but it is something to keep your eye on if you end up purchasing this knife. In and out of the pocket should be reasonably easy. We have a nice clip design it's a little pointy right here, but I gotta be honest, it's not really creating any, I'm aware that it's there, but it's not an ergonomic hotspot or anything like that. Nice ramp right here, but it is sitting right on top of Peel Ply Texture G10 scales, so over time it will absolutely fray up your pants. There is a steel lock bar insert that is doubling as the over travel stop alongside, yeah, that is true, alongside the fact that this is lipped underneath the G10 scale, so that's not going anywhere. There is also a stop pin located in its traditional place right there with some nice shouldering. This knife does run on bearings, but you probably knew that already. No blade play up, down, left, or right. No detent lash. No double clutch, but it is close. No pivot lash. Very smooth and consistent action. And a really nice detent that you can't really hear. It's kind of a thud click, but no detent lash when it's closed. Your organic lockup is coming in at 40, 50%, something like that. I mean, it's a pretty thin blade stock and a fairly thin lock bar. But yeah, I think we can actually see the mark. Maybe? Where's it? Is it locking up under the flipper tab? Yeah, it is. So right there, about 50%. Obviously not a knife you're going to be going out and doing crazy hard work with. This is just like a fancy, very dependable and plenty durable, but it's kind of a fancy, minimal, just regular EDC knife that's got some cool features to it. This is neat. We've seen designs like this before. We've seen knives like this before. It's not completely and totally unique, but we see less stuff like this when we do stuff like this, right? We still see stuff like this all the time. So this is kind of neat if you're looking for something a little bit different. the S35EN, the titanium, the inlays, right? The least expensive version of this knife, which this is one of them, it comes in about $180, which I don't think is bad. There's certainly other brands out there that are extremely competitive. We've got companies like Miguron using S90V in this territory. We've got Kunwu also bringing amazing quality to the table for right around this price point. But this is just fine. And especially considering Kansept's quality has just gotten better and better and better over time. If you like how this knife looks, I think you'll really enjoy it, and I don't have a problem with the price tag. It's just not really something that I would openly recommend to everybody because there's not, other than it just being a thinner thing in your pocket, you're not really gaining that much benefit from it. I think that there are knives that are a little bit better at filling the hand and a little bit better in terms of manipulation and especially blade geometry that will essentially take up the same amount of room or create the exact same carry experience. And you just have a better knife, and they'll cost, a lot of them cost about the same amount of money. So, I'm not going to openly recommend this to everybody, but it's not a bad knife, and the price and overall quality doesn't bother me. So, if you like it, then, if you like how this looks and the things that I've said to watch out for don't really bother you, then I think you'll probably enjoy this knife. The pocket clip thing kind of bothers me a little bit. Everything else is perfectly fine, though. So, that's really going to be about it today, guys. Like I said, this will be linked right down below in the description if you want to check it out. Thanks to Kansept Knives for sending this in. Please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do, of course, have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like, so check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, go ahead and click on that Metal Complex logo right there and subscribe because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have a great day.